In League of Legends, one crack becomes a collapse. A single lost fight, a stolen Baron, a failed defense, and the whole game will unravel. After 2 weeks of battles, the strongest are rising and the fragile are breaking. In Week 3, we'll see who can hold their ground and who crumbles when all falls down. Welcome everybody to another episode of Tilt Proof League of Legends. It's episode 2, and we're here to recap Week 2 of the Division 1 schedule in the League of Legends division. My name is Grapes, joined alongside Alk Battery once again. A reminder, if you want your Valorant fix, go head over to the Valorant Tilt Proof episode as well, where our lovely talent will be breaking down those games as well. But another week of games, Alk, and we got some fun results once again.
Yeah, I don't think anything was like too out of the ordinary, at least from what we saw. I think everything kind of fell in line. I'm sad that yet again another West Virginia. We actually got to see West Virginia this time, so we're making headway here.
Yeah, I think all of us predicted from last week. Our teams were right. I had one game that was incorrect from our original predictions. I thought it was maybe going to be a Maryville 2-1, ended up being a Maryville 2-0, but you know what? We'll take it. 4 for 4 in terms of the teams that I ended up predicting. It's a fun time in Division 1. The regular season is just getting underway. We're first getting new looks at all the different rosters and some fun looks at the standings as well, as we can get into that in just a little bit. But let's start off by recapping some of the big matches that happened this week, starting off with Boise State taking on The Ohio State University. The Buckeyes end up taking a 2-0 victory. I feel like for this series specifically, a big focus about this Ohio State University team is always Fire and what he can bring to the table, but kind of took a back step and ended up being a more utility role, setting up for, in my opinion, the MVP of this series, 5-1-1-5-0 on the 80 carry.
I was actually able to watch this game, so I want to thank Kelsey Moser and the crew over at Boise State for giving me and, by extension, Kai, one of our observers, the opportunity to really kind of get in on the ground floor of this game. This game didn't seem very close from what I saw. Like, yes, 5150 is doing well, but what I was really, really excited about was game 2 of this series. Like, Boise is on... I'm checking the website. It says they're on red side. They were on blue side for this game. They're playing like this Neela Jana comp versus Kaisa Pike. I thought that was incredible. We have Lee Sin and Syndra. I was thinking, okay, on paper, we should be able to win this game. Do I think it's a little difficult for us to be able to play? Kind of, yes. But if there was ever a very simple composition that maybe led towards the strengths of their team, which is get Paint and Liquor ahead, let the Cake and Hydro kind of be facilitators for all of that action to happen, and Jana versus a Viego, a Pike, and a Fiora sounds like a absolute dream matchup for me. They just unfortunately couldn't get past the laning phase. Like, Sion versus Fiora, Grapes, you yourself are a Sion main. That one's
Hard
not very
matchup.
fun to play, and he got solo killed very early on. And then the Cake and Hydro tried to play a 2v2 around mid, and it completely gave up all of the they lost the 2v2 in mid as Syndra and Lee Sin versus Viego Twisted Fate. Everything kind of went wrong very quickly in that series. So I was kind of sad to see it, but not unexpected when we think this is a Boise State that we are expecting to potentially not even win a single game here in Division 1.
Yeah, but continuing to develop and improve their gameplay as we go throughout the season. Seeing a standout performer like Paint Liquor on the Neela in the bottom lane in that game too definitely is exciting for future prospects for Boise State. They could potentially have a winnable matchup this upcoming week. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Utah take on Winthrop University. This was a Winthrop 2-0, and I think a lot of some hesitation maybe for Winthrop initially because they did end up losing to Maryville in week 1. They proved that they definitely still deserve to be in that title contender conversation.
I remember casting this game, and my first thought was, how do we get 2 games in a row of some of the most unplayable matchups possible? Like, the only one that was even vaguely, like, I think maybe something they could do was Horizon in the mid lane. Game 1, he picks the Vladimir into Ryze. It's a little tough because Ryze can duel the Vladimir early, and Vladimir is going to be able to scale later on in the game. I think it's kind of tough when you're then going to have a bad matchup topside. You have a losing matchup in bottom lane with the Corki and Rel. So where are we ever supposed to find an advantage? This was also the debut of Rapid for Winthrop, which I think was going to be the only way this team on Utah was going to ever find a win, was having a player that has not played very many stage games, at least for Winthrop, in the past couple years.
Yeah, Rapid has been a part of a couple of the Winthrop B team organizations when they play in certain amateur and collegiate tournaments, but for the most part doesn't get a ton of time on the starting roster, so good to see him get an opportunity here, and had a pretty solid performance, on the Maokai in Game 1, on the Pantheon in Game 2, very clearly taking that utility role to set up for the rest of his team, the likes of Denethor and Mobility, who both had incredible series overall. And
yes,
yeah, not much to worry about here for this Winthrop team, at least for now. Sure, they dropped a series to Maryville, but we still think that they are going to be a really big contender. Yeah, Maryville, speaking of, let's talk about who Maryville beat this week, which ended up being St. Clair. And we thought, Alk, that this could have been a closer series. And, the games were entertaining, and there was a lot of fighting back and forth. It was very clear that, to me, St. Clair's strategy was to be very aggressive all the time, force a lot of fights, try to get their AD carry Lig ahead and get him a bunch of gold in the early game. But once we got to the mid-game portions of the game, of both of these games in the series, it's where Maryville really were able to take over and prove why they're such a dominant roster.
This is a total snapshot series in my mind, because if you looked at 10 minutes in both of these games, you would think that St. Clair won this series. You're like, oh, cool. We have really great gold leads, especially Game 1. Game 1 was like, holy crap, is St. Clair going to win? Like, is this how we're starting off the season, boys? We go to Game 3 versus Winthrop. Okay, fine. We have an excuse there. Now we're playing up against St. Clair, another team that we're expecting to be top 3, and holy crap, they're kind of winning. Maybe this is a close game, but it's that mid-game portion you're mentioning. Just, so many weird fights. Like, in particular, I was looking at Maryville's social media. They noted that Shimmer was man of the week for them. Earned. Got himself a pentakill in game number 1. His Vi was completely smurfing once they got out of the laning phase. I'm happy. I'm happier with where Maryville are at right now, but St. Clair, come on, we've got Coach Matty, man. We got Coach Matty in the lineup. Like,
hey, his early games
where's the discipline?
Good. He has some good plans in the early game to get his team ahead, and they often did so. The bot lane shenanigans in game number 2 in the Misfortune Nico versus the Callisto Renata was definitely left some to be desired, but cool for Maryville to pick up the win, even though they weren't running their full starting roster. Obviously, Shimmer was in the jungle, and they had Spirax playing in the top lane for that series as well.
So, funny story about that. So we were coming in, we were like, oh, is Crimson going to play today? Because at the same time, not only were there games going on here in Division 1, but there was also an Aegis Champions League series that had CCG playing, which is both Music and Crimson. Obviously, Music didn't show up. I was supposed to cast that game, and we find out 15 minutes after the game is supposed to start that neither CCG nor Lotus could make the game. And they had a week to make the reschedule. So neither of that. So I'm talking with Gordo about, are we FFing this series? Crimson is like, I'm not even playing. I'm not even here right now. Like, I'm doing something else at this time. So I thought it was hilarious that me and some of the other cast members were trying to find Maryville players to figure out what was going on in other leagues.
Hey, that's the beauty of Maryville, is that they always got some backups to play. Even, Spirax is traditionally a mid laner, able to come back here for the fall at the very least and, flex those top lane muscles a little bit. He got to play he played top lane maybe 2 years ago at HughFest in 66. So,
yes,
getting a hand on the Rumble again, ended up doing fine and allowing for the rest of his team to really step up. So Maryville, kind of defeating the 2 challenges that they have faced so far in both Winthrop and St. Clair, which is a very good sign for them moving forward, especially with the new look roster. Our final matchup of the week was Stony Brook 2-0ing the West Virginia University, and this was another relatively one-sided game. Again, this is the team, Stony Brook, that I'm pretty hyped about going in, especially with Keetong at the support position, but it was his carries who really delivered, specifically in the mid lane. Wainahama Sila?
Yana. So here, we're going to do this all together, guys. Yanahama.
Yanahama.
Sila.
Yanahama Sila on the Yone.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Hey, 13-1-4 in game 2, and then of course had a pretty solid victor game in game 1. Obviously, I'm always excited to see what Keetong and then his bot laner, the Chubby Pig, are able to do, but really cool to see other members of Stony Brook also take a step forward.
You got to sell me on this roster, because me and Gordo were going back and forth on this. I think Stony Brook are more likely to be a 5th place team here in this league, just because I imagine that OSU is going to take that 4th slot. So I want to give this time to you, since I've been kind of giving the analysis here. Well, why should I be excited about Stony Brook? Like, what's going on here?
So this is a newer varsity organization. You might remember Stony Brook from maybe 6 or 7 years ago, where they had Dark Wings
right?
playing there, but it was just a club program at the time. But now they're fully, or not fully varsity, but like, you know, a very established program. They have pro players like Keetong coming in from the NACL to end up playing for them, and for me, they were a very creative team last year, and I think that can be attributed not just to the players that were on the roster, but also just the organizational philosophy, right? You have Keetong playing things like the Swain support in Game 2. He was whipping out some other really crazy, like, kind of carry support champions, and it was a team that understood their identity and were able to draft around it and have a playstyle that fit it. And last year, they ended up placing pretty well in the Eastern Conference and making a run towards the CLOL Championship. So that's why I've been pretty excited about Stony Brook. Whereas for Ohio State, you know, there's definitely some hype around them as well. I just, you know, it's my personal bias maybe for the East Conferences and just the teams on the East Coast.
There you go. There you go. Okay, that's all I needed to hear. Because I was like, is this legitimate hype? Because Keetong is an exciting player, but there's only so much support can impact in a game, especially if your laners are not in a good spot. And we saw this versus West Virginia. Another draft where I'm like, okay, how are we ever supposed to win when we have an Ahri and we're playing Ezreal into Sivir? Like, this is a nightmare matchup. I'm playing Nautilus into Rel, like, very, very free for Stony Brook. And we talked with Dancing with the BL in week 1 during their series, and we were like, so what's going on with these, like, special picks for Keetong? And it's mostly not like something that they're coming in prepared for. I think maybe that'll get tuned up as they go into the CLOL proper of 2026, talking about actual draft strategy. But I know a lot of these guys are taking this fall, and specifically Division 1, we're just having fun. We're gonna just, you know, do our things. And Yana Hamasaila in the post-game interview was talking a lot of smack. He's like, we haven't gotten pushed. We've done zero prep for any of these teams because we're just smashing everybody. So next week we'll do a little bit more, since we're gonna be playing Maryville.
It's a very confident mindset, and hey, so far it has Stony Brook at a perfect 2-0 in the standings with a perfect game score. So congratulations to them. I believe that means that they're at the top of our standings, as we can get into our discussion about the standings. As our 3 undefeated teams right now are Stony Brook, Maryville, and the Ohio State. We have Winthrop and St. Clair both at 1-1, albeit the caveat being both their losses have been to Maryville so far. And then we have West Virginia, Boise State, and Utah rounding it out at 0-2. Obviously, you know, the teams that each of these other teams have played against so far have an impact in the standings, given that we're very early on. But has there any been surprises for you out of the first 2 weeks of games so far?
I think if St. Clair can fix up their mid-game, I think this team could potentially pressure Winthrop. We'll see what happens. Ricky is still playing top lane. Currently, Sama, their top laner that they ran with last year, is in EU for a little bit. So he'll be back in time for spring. So we'll see if Ricky continues to play as a super senior at this point. We were joking about whether or not Ricky's going to be on the lineup. I think St. Clair have some interesting play. It's just, are they going to be able to beat on a Winthrop who I think have made a lot of the same decisions that they've had over the last couple years, and mostly going to attribute that to the fact that this group has been playing together for such a long time. And now that they're going to be more so incorporating Rapid, does this team look a little bit more limited? Because Rapid has, in my mind, always been a guy that prefers to play like the stacking carries, the farming carries. I don't know why I always associate Rapid with like an Udyr or like a Hecarim, these kinds of champions.
Yeah.
Whereas Wilson is going to be your Xin Zhao, your vibe player. Sometimes will pull out a Kindred like we saw, but is really going to be a little bit more aggressive in the early game.
It'll be interesting to see how exactly they maneuver that roster going forward because it's been a very solid core of Winthrop players for 3 or 4 years at this point. You have
Mm-hmm.
Denethor, Mobility, Sword, and coming in and being that core. Wilson joining joining relatively recently, and then only 35 entering his second year of play with the university. But it's been a long time with this core specifically of players, and seeing the different rotations and what really could help them get over that hump to maybe being able to contest a team like Maryville is certainly something that I have my eyes on going forward. Any last thoughts about the standings? I mean, in terms of some other featured matchups, we have Winthrop and St. Clair both at 1-1. We're not going to see them play until week 5, but for now,
Mm-hmm.
with the fact that they have a common opponent against Maryville, does it just feel like Winthrop are still, in your opinion, like a top 2 team, or do you think St. Clair can contest with them?
Yeah, I think right now, if we were to just take strength of teams and slot them to playoffs, I would expect that Maryville, Winthrop, St. Clair is our top 3, and then it's like a division point, so we'll have those 3, and then right now I'm battling between OSU and Stony Brook for a 4th, 5th slot, but I need to see those 2 teams play against each other, kind of to hash out who really is the better team, because I've been on the train that OSU is better. We talked about potentially Stony Brook is that team, but I think the Stony Brook Soul Laners, I need to see a little bit more out of them. I need to see them not get free lanes for 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, that's fair enough. We'll see as the competition gets harder. They're gonna get a big test against Maryville this week, and then we'll see how it continues to change after that. Let's take a look at some of the biggest stats that have been hitting the Rift so far. As no surprise, if you go to the Division 1 website and you look up the top level statistics in the League of Legends division, it's a lot of Maryville on your screen. Shimmer leads in KDA, Crimson leads in creep score average, Cryogen leads in vision score, and Music with 11.8 gold, 1,000 gold at 15.
No way that's real. There's no way we have an 11,000 or almost 12K goal difference at 50. This has to be cumulative.
Probably it must
I
be.
don't know how
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got that number, because
It's
that's
probably a
actually
difference,
insane.
average difference over the games or something like that.
That's crazy though, to have a 12 in jungle. That's nuts. The one true stat that I do believe in though is Shimmer. 20.75 KDA. Shimmer has been playing really, really solid. Only has been splitting time with Music, so we'll kind of see what that looks like throughout the season. His KDA is going to be heavily influenced by the number of games he ends up playing, but I think for a player that came into Maryville with a lot of doubts, had to fill in big shoes, and has been talked down by, I think, a lot of opponents, at least previously before they were able to pick up a championship. I think him and Music sharing that spot and potentially seeing who's the better for 2026 is going to be very, very pivotal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably Music is being the favorite right now, but Shimmer had such a great series against St. Clair that you have to put him into consideration, especially because of the fact that he is one of the few players remaining that actually was on that stage winning the CLO championship last year. And that definitely has to have at least some level of impact into how you value these players and what they can bring to the table going into the collegiate season. Obviously, there's still a lot of time to figure it out before the LAN finals eventually happen here for Division 1, but great to, see that Shimmer is still able to perform, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say like Shimmer and Music feel like player and people archetypes kind of similar. Shimmer's a little bit more outgoing, but I would say like they're both doers. They're gonna get the job done. You play the jungle role, you're gonna eventually have to do that. Their champion pools are really what the big difference are, and we'll see how that ends up shaking out, because I think Shimmer has the potential to have maybe a higher floor just because of what he does for the team, but I think Music maybe opens up a higher ceiling. But I need to see what he looks like on this team, because I think a lot of Music's narrative outside of collegiate is tied to mostly what he's been doing in NACL, and ISU was kind of a weird spot, I think, for what they got done.
Yeah, wish that it was a longer tenure there, but now gets another
Mm-hmm.
chance to increase his legacy in the collegiate space here with Maryville University. Before we move on to our match previews for next week, let's dive a little bit deeper into our featured matchup of week number 2, which was Maryville going up against St. Clair. Now, we talked a lot about how maybe the mid game from St. Clair needed some improving going forward, but Maryville found themselves at deficits for both games. In the early games, Spyrax was asked about it by our production and journalism team about just getting caught out in the early game, falling victim to ganks, and how they can improve on it moving forward. And a quote from him was, "It's a problem that we're aware of, and we're not going to win a championship until we fix it." Now, those are some bold words here, Alk.
Legendary
do you feel
quote.
like there are some? Do you feel like the weaknesses are still there for Maryville, or are you worried about them at all?
I'm worried about their carries just from a laning perspective. They seemed fine. I think Spyrax is also probably not the best player to ask this question, usually because Spyrax is very, I think, closed off sometimes when he gives interviews. He can be a little bit more reserved. Jerry has been quite a player. That's all I'm going to say. He mechanically isn't playing well, both in lane and then some of these team fights. I remember he gave an interview question to our journalism team about how did they bounce back versus Winthrop, and he said, all I had to do is remind myself that these guys are trash, which I think is at least very fun, Scary Jerry giving us that kind of bravado. But especially for a player like that, he did the same thing in LTA of being willing to give a little bit of trash talk or being able to have that confidence. But a big important part of that is being able to show it up on the Rift. And sure, on Maryville, you can get away with a lot of stuff, but if you're not going to win, or if you're going to have moments where you stumble, you might be able to get away with that in Division 1 with how we've talked about where the conference is at, like strength-wise for all 8 teams. But in a LoL championship, when we get ready for 2026, you've got to get it in gear, brother, because that is not going to slide when it comes time to play best of 5s at the end of the season.
That is true. I mean, especially against a team like Winthrop or St. Clair, who maybe can be able to punish those mistakes over a longer series. There's some, good opportunities for them to take advantage of that. And it's my opinion, and something that we've been talking a lot about as a broadcast, that these opening weeks are going to be the weakest that Maryville are likely ever going to be with the iteration of this specific roster, because it's a lot of new players coming in, a lot of roster turnover from the previous CLOL winning team, even though, you have guys like Scary Jerry coming back to MU after spending some time in both the LTA North and the NACL. But just getting time to acclimate with each other, to understand what each player wants and how they each play a role in the specific team is going to be important to learn. And obviously the laning phase is something that they're going to have to work on. I know that they have the highs of being incredibly gifted mechanical players, and so I'm not necessarily worried about it, but sure, we should try to work on it moving forward, and they'll have a good chance to do it against a team like Stony Brook here this week. Talking about just the general meta and kind of the way the games have been going so far, Alk, I feel like my favorite part of CLOL is always getting this chance to see new, unique picks get locked in, and seeing pocket picks and fun off-meta stuff get thrown around just to make sure that you're always keeping your opponent off guard. I feel like that's a big part of the collegiate landscape. Are there is there any discussion about the meta that you want to have, about things that you've been enjoying watching so far that maybe we don't always see in the higher levels of competitive play?
I think West Virginia are maybe an interesting team. Like, the first stream games that we got to see, I'm never going to let this go. West Virginia, if you ever stream games again, which we are going to get into this, West Virginia is going to have another game that is not streamed, if I remember correctly, because they are going to be playing against Boise. West Virginia, please publish the VODs. I'm begging you. Please. We've got all streams? All right, never mind. But still, please upload the VODs. I'm begging you guys. Yeah, I think West Virginia is maybe a little bit interesting. The meta's not, like, super out of whack. Like, we're getting some mages, like we're getting mostly Ziggs in terms of the mage representation. Top lane seems like it's about where it's at. We're getting Rumble, a little bit of Ornn. Some people are still playing Ambessa. I don't think it's too interesting, all things considered. I just wonder what the game is going to look like in a couple of weeks, because we're going to have the new patch coming on through. We already have 2519 on live right now. imagine playoffs is still going to be about 3.5, 4 weeks away. So we're going to be playing on a patch that not even internationally teams are even scrimming on at the same time. So we're going to be seeing, I think, a lot of the collegiate teams top end wise looking towards like the intermeta. What are we strong at? What is potentially going to be abusable here? And for the lower teams, don't worry about the meta. Just worry about your own team. What can we play? What are the things that are unique to us that we enjoy playing? Because you are never, ever going to beat a Maryville, a St. Clair, a Winthrop playing standard. Ever. Like 99% of games. I'm sorry to a Boise State. I'm sorry to a West Virginia, a Stony Brook. Never is going to happen in my mind. You have to bring out the unique stuff. And that's where I think things like the set top versus Rumble that we saw. Interesting, didn't end up working out. That's where things I think like the Nila that we were talking about. Interesting, didn't work, but I think the framework is there. That's what's important for these students.
Even if it's not a specific counter matchup to a champion that's getting locked in, I agree with you. Comfort, especially for some of the teams that are still developing, still learning how to play together in the early parts of the season, is very important. Just making sure you have compositions that you're familiar with and champions that not only you have experience on, but you have experience scrimming with across the rest of your team, so they also understand your kill angles, your windows to go for ganks and things like that. That's what I am excited to see Stony Brook again continue to try to develop here with Ketong. I keep bringing this up just because we not only have seen it this year, but also last year when he was with the university, but just the playing of some of these off-meta supports. Obviously, we saw the Jarvan and the Shaco in week 1. We saw the Swain in week 2. Maybe you can see something a little bit more fun going into that week 3 matchup against Maryville University. Speaking of, let's start off with our matches of week 3 and breaking them all down and seeing who exactly we have favored here. Starting off with Ohio State taking on Winthrop University. Now, in terms of record, Ohio State have the better record, but in theory, Winthrop potentially have the stronger roster in our eyes going in. What are your thoughts about if it is a possibility of Ohio State pulling off an upset, or if we think that Winthrop are just going to run through it, just like they have been able to do against other teams so far this season?
I think this is a 2-0, unfortunately, for Winthrop. I don't know if Ohio State's laners... Sword's actually been playing decently, if not maybe a little too aggressive for, a guy who's been in the role for a long time. But I think that Winthrop have shown just, again, relying on the body of games that we have with at least 4 out of the 5 of these players playing together. I think the body of their work has shown that they are good enough to beat Ohio State. Ohio State historically has been okay, but has moved down away from the North Conference and playing in MEC. So it's kind of like you're not really, I think, not in a super strong conference outside of Division One. I don't think that the Buckeyes are going to be able to, if they find a single game win, it's not only going to be 5-fire. I think that there is maybe an angle for this bottom lane to work out, but I think the games that we saw from Winthrop versus Utah is going to be a little bit more indicative of what might happen to an Ohio State.
Whoever is in the bot lane here, the bot lane here or the jungle position for Ohio State is going to be interesting to see who they end up swapping in and out, because it has been a bit of a rotating roster throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. We talked to 5-fire in week 1. He was discussing how the changes might, continue to come in throughout the early parts of the season. I wouldn't be surprised to try to see them find specific matchups that they think work well, either in terms of player 1v1s or just champions that they think could work well into Winthrop. But I would agree with you. Winthrop are still the big favorites, even though I think there is a chance that maybe Ohio State take a game, but it's pretty unlikely in my eyes. Moving on to our next matchup, Utah taking on St. Clair. Opportunity for Utah to get their first win of the regular season, and for St. Clair, they want to try to bounce back after losing to Maryville, as their schedule will lighten up the rest of the way.
2-0. I don't think we have to talk too much about this. Utah have, I feel bad for them, but a lot of their lanes got gapped last time. Like, you're playing against Winthrop, that's fine. I think the drafts weren't really helping them out. It was a tough look. I'm 2-0. 2-0. I've got nothing. I feel bad. I don't know what else to say. They got owned.
Yeah, I'm going to say 2-0 as well. Not necessarily as an indictment towards Utah. I think that the Utes are going to be able to find wins throughout the rest of the season as they go throughout. Mm-hmm. But St. Clair, to me, is still a very exciting team. And this is more of accreditation to them than maybe trying to take away what Utah have done so far in the start of the season. I'm excited to see St. Clair try to pull away with like a dominant 2-0 win, because that would mean that, okay, we're really here to play. We're here to put on a show, and against a team that I think is a little bit stronger than who St. Clair are already beat in week number 1. Speaking of, let's go into our matchup between West Virginia University and Boise State University. Somebody's going to have to pick up their first win of the season. These are two teams that are definitely on the developing side, but it's going to be a really good time and a good opportunity for both of them to get some high-level competition against each other.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly the matchup that I think is going to determine who is at the bottom of the standings, aside from maybe a Boise versus the Utes or Utah. This is the matchup that I think determines who is going to be the 8th place team in the lineup right now, because West Virginia, newer roster, but I think what they showed me versus Stony Brook was good enough. The problem, and something that we'll figure out as we get the lineups, is that there was a substitution in top lane for the series. Someone that we didn't think was going to be coming in, Aoilos. Again, I want to apologize if we are mispronouncing your name for West Virginia's top laner, but they seemed, I think there were parts of that game that if they hadn't gotten run over in their solo lanes, this could have been a much more even game. Sauer is actually, I think, a decent jungle player from the games that we did get to see from him. Unfortunately, he has, between his 2 solo laners in game number 2, 2-15. This is unplayable by any metric. And then your bottom lane is 4-16 by the end of the game. So in total, your solo laners got, 6 kills, and you have 10 by yourself on this Hecarim. There is not much you can do as a jungler in that point. That is true jungle diff in the true sense of the word. There's only so much you can get done on this. So Boise's laners, we got to get it together. We need to play the simplest of all time champions and team compositions if we're going to get our first game victory here in the league.
Man, so you're predicting West Virginia then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'll be a little different. I'll say the Broncos pick it up. I know that we were debating the over/under, but I like what I've been seeing in terms of the creativity, some of the unique drafts that they've been going for. Obviously, they have Kelsey behind the wheel in terms of trying to help out with some of the pick bans and strategies. And both these teams are more on the inexperienced side, but I'll say Boise State pick up their first win.
All right. I want to see the lines, unfortunately, over on division1.gg. There are pick'ems. There is still not the lines opened up for this weekend's games. So I want to see, because I will say this is no shade to the people at Div 1. Some of these lines are insane. 5 Fire between maps 1 and 2 has to get 15 kills. That's not, I think, too out of line, but like Scary Jerry between maps 1 and 2, 14 kills. I was like, okay, that seems like a lot. There was one for the West Virginia Sorrow. Games 1 and 2 has to have 14 deaths. Jesus Christ.
It's a lot, but also you think about the balance between some of the teams that they're facing off against, and maybe it's not as crazy as you may think. So it's always one of those games where sometimes the number knows more than even what we know, because it just is like some of the ways that you think about things are not able to be quantified via the formulas in there. But yeah, let's finish things off with our next match of the week. 2 undefeated teams facing off against each other, that being Maryville University and Stony Brook. Now, Stony Brook is 2-0, but they played Boise State and West Virginia, the two teams that we think are maybe on on the weaker side, at least so far in the season. Meanwhile, Maryville have beaten 2 tournament favorites in Winthrop and St. Clair. So 2 different roads to 2-0, but still there regardless. Do we think that Stony Brook have any chance of taking a game? I know that we were maybe a little bit high on St. Clair, and that didn't end up being the case.
I am looking at the solo lanes, and I think with the performance, it doesn't matter who we put in. If we get Crimson, if we get Spyrax, I think the difference in either of those solo laners is going to be important here. What I am going to be looking for is the bottom lanes. We just came in talking about that Scary Jerry isn't playing as to expectation, even here in week 2. Still a little bit too aggressive. Still, I think, making a lot of mechanical errors. And then you are going to be going up against, I think, the best part of Stony Brook's lineup all season long now in Chubby Pig and Ketong. If they can get an advantage, I think the game becomes a little bit more reasonable, but again, Stony Brook haven't been tested so far in the season. They have been played against very easy opponents here, and if this is your first, like, real test, this is a wake-up call. This is a massive haymaker you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, it might be a bit of a rude awakening, and I feel like that has to be my prediction. I think we just have to go Maryville 2-0. It's the responsible thing to do. However, I am curious to see what Stony Brook's strategy is going into this series, because we talked about the interviews that you guys got to have and seeing how maybe Stony Brook is going to lock in a little bit more with their preparation going into this week of games. So I'm curious to see what that ends up turning out to be, right? There's definitely a lot of ways that it could go. However, for me, none of it really ends up in too much success. So for me, down the line real quick, and I'll let you do with this afterwards, I have Winthrop 2-0 over Ohio State, St. Clair 2-0 over Utah, Boise 2-1 over West Virginia, and then Maryville 2-0 over Stony Brook.
You're not only having them win their first game, they're also going to win their first series?
They're winning the series. Right. They're doing it.
Damn. That's one way you get ahead in the predictions.
I like the I got a jersey from Boise State, so I might wear it when.
Oh, okay. So Doc has you bought out. All right, good to know.
No. I just I have an opportunity to support them.
So my predictions, pretty boring across the board. I think personally, match of the week should be Ohio State versus Winthrop. This is probably the closest one we're gonna get between any of these games, in my opinion, anyway. 2-1 for Winthrop. I think Ohio State can grab a game. Utah versus St. Clair should be a 2-0 going over to the Saints. West Virginia versus Boise State. I think West Virginia should take their first confident 2-0 of the season. Or very confident 2-0 of the season, I should say. And then Maryville versus Stony Brook. If this is anything other than a 2-0 for Maryville, I think Clerky has to, we have to burn the whole program down. I'm sorry. Dr. Lombardi, something has gone very wrong in the athletics department over here. There is no reason for us to be losing games versus Stony Brook, in my opinion.
Hey, it's still early in the season, so still time to, fix any of these problems if they do show up. But I agree with you. I think Maryville should take this one relatively handily here. So with that being said, rounds out our second episode of Tilt Proof League of Legends, where we got to break down a lot of the different matches and the teams that are getting to play. It's good that we finally have gotten the opportunity to see a lot of these teams get matches against their oppositions and get some more tape in after week number 2. Before we wrap up the show here, I guess to revisit the episode theme, which is that all can fall down here. Is there any contender that you think could potentially have some trouble here this week? To me, it seems like you're looking at Winthrop.
I think Winthrop is one of them for sure. This is the team that looks a little shaky. If anything, it's Winthrop and St. Clair. It's our 2-3 teams that we're kind of looking at here in the season. So if they can lose here this week, I think it then further separates and make this basically a one-team league. It makes it a Maryville and everybody else kind of league, playing for second, which is what we were talking about coming into this season.
And give me one player that you have your eyes on any of these teams that could be a big difference maker in their respective series.
I want to see. Give me a Boise State. I want to see Paint Liquor take it home.
That was my answer.
Nope. That's it. See, this is why you should have just gone first. See, you can't always toss
true.
them. You should have just taken it.
That's true. I will go. To 5150, the bot laner here for the Ohio State University. If they have the opportunity to do anything against Mobility, who, in our opinion, has been the best AD carry in the tournament so far, at least through these first 2 weeks, that will be an opportunity for Ohio State to get a win. And he's had some really good showing so far. The KDAs have looked nice. He only played 3 of the 4 games so far for the team, but still in a very good position moving forward. But yeah, with that being said, thank you so much to everybody watching. If you want to check out our Valorant episode, make sure to also tune into that on our YouTube channel right here at Division 1. And thank you so much for watching. Alk, any final thoughts before we sign off for the day?
No, watch Division 1 and make sure that you log in to get your pick'ems. There are rewards such as a keyboard. There's also a monitor that you can win. Honestly, I'm looking at trying to just get third here because I want $50 in RP. I don't need a new keyboard or a monitor. So $50 RP, I can buy a single Jinx skin.
That better than nothing. Hey, I'll take that if I could get my pick'ems right. So we'll see if it ends up working out. So yeah, make sure to log in, and also make sure every Sunday and Monday on twitch.tv/division1lol and twitch.tv/division1val to get your weekly fix of the top tier collegiate League of Legends and collegiate esports that we have here in North America. Thank you so much for watching Tillproof, and we'll see you all next time.